The arc begins with Gon and Killua attempting to buy the game Greed Island, but sadly every copy is purchased by a billionaire named Mr. Batera, who's searching for people to play through the game for him. So before they're able to play Greed Island, they're going to need to prove themselves capable of the task to Mr. Batera's partner Tasgara, which doesn't go spectacularly. Gon and Killua don't have any special Nen abilities, so they're very quickly turned away and forced to improve before Tasgara holds an exam to determine the players. Eventually, the time comes for Gon and Killua to prove themselves, and of course they both pass, meaning it's now time for Greed Island, the most dangerous game in the world. But before I talk about Gon and Killua's adventure through Greed Island, I'll first need to explain how the game works. Firstly, the game can only be accessed by people that are able to use Nen, as the game teleports anyone using Nen to a different location in the real world, something we learn from the Phantom Troop. During York New City, the Phantom Troop played a massive part in the story, and them being a part of this arc made complete sense. Half of them are looking for treasure, and the other spiders are looking for a way to get Corollo's Nen back. But I don't understand why it was necessary to disclose that Greed Island is a real place. We get one scene where the Phantom Troop attempts to enter Greed Island by boat, but they're removed almost instantly, and the game being set in the real world doesn't really have any significance going forward. It's an interesting concept. If Greed Island exists in the real world, then Jing would have had to manipulate an entire island using Nen to make it more game-like, but outside of making Jing and his friends look like colonizers, it adds very little to the overall plot. However, I haven't really explained how the game works, so let's do just that. The game revolves around cards. To beat Greed Island, our favourite neglected main character will need to find a total of 100 specified slot cards, and to help in that goal, Gon will be able to make use of spell cards. Slot cards rarely serve any practical use, they're mainly a tool for completing the game, although some of them are really good, like the Pregnancy Stone, a stone that will make anyone pregnant no matter their gender. But why is such a ridiculous card so important? Well, this very card is responsible for the existence of Gon. We've never seen Gon's mum, because Jing was the one who gave birth. This isn't a theory, this is a fact. But most of the time, spell cards are more useful. Some of them can track other players, while some can fully heal any ailment, and they're all used via the binder. At the beginning of Greed Island, players are given a binder that displays each card they've collected, and the name of everyone they've encountered, something that leads our ever-innocent protagonist to a creepy clown later on. Overall, I really like the mechanics of Greed Island. The rules aren't anything special, but Togashi did a really good job at incorporating the game mechanics into almost every fight, and I think Gon's attitude towards Greed Island really helped with this. Upon entering Greed Island, it's clear to see just how naive Gon is for wanting to play the game as intended. After entering the game, Gon and Killua are confronted by a long-time player that could have done them serious harm, and later on they come across someone executed by the Bomber, a serial killer terrorizing the players of Greed Island. It's obvious this game isn't safe, but when Gon is given an offer to join a group of players that think Greed Island is objectively bad, he turns them down out of blind admiration for his father. Gon acts like the people playing Greed Island are the problem, but that's not the case. That group were right, Jing made a game that encourages violence, so eventually, someone like the bomber was bound to show up, and I don't exactly see his friends enforcing any rule other than mentioning that Greed Island is real. I think Togashi used this arc to truly solidify just how terrible of a person Jing is. He basically instructs one of his friends to beat Gon, so I'd say that makes him a pretty bad dad. But of course, Gon looks past everything and simply enjoys the game alongside Killua and their new friend. While exploring Greed Island, the boys meet a young girl named Biscuit Kruger, or more commonly known as Bisky, who falls into the little girl that's actually much older trope, which I utterly despise. If this trope shows up while I'm watching an anime, then I may just turn off the series, never to return. But in this case, it's actually okay. Instead of being weird and sexualizing Bisky, the series makes it into more of a gag, and I even ended up liking her character quite a lot. But why is she here? Well, it's training time. Greed Island is basically a glorified training arc, and it's incredible. Bisky comes up with some really funny exercises for Gon and Killua, so their training never felt boring. But it's not long until Killua leaves to retake the Hunter exam, leaving Gon to train with Bisky while waiting for his friend to return. At the moment, these three are basically existing in their own bubble. They haven't been collecting cards, so there's been no reason for anyone to attack them. But the group that tried recruiting Gon and Killua earlier are in some big trouble. After making a big announcement to all of their allies, a man named Genfuru walks on stage and reveals himself to be the Bomber, who is probably the most underrated villain in Hunter x Hunter. Hisoka, Ilumi, and Corolo are all fantastic villains, but Genfuru's chaotic nature is wonderful. I love villains that have tragic backstories and deep goals, but Genfuru is my favourite type of villain. He acts out of pure greed. He'll torment and slaughter anyone and everyone just to get his hand on some cards, but I personally believe that it isn't about the cards. I think most of Genfuru's actions are simply acted out to satisfy his lust for destruction, thus making him Gon's natural enemy. And thankfully, the one person to survive the Bomber's massacre informs Gon and Bisky of his true identity, so eventually Gon will be facing off against Genfuru, but we've still got quite some time before that happens. Genfuru couldn't care less about a couple of kids, and after Killua returns, the group continues to play through Greed Island as intended, until another group recruits them to help find a card named Patch of Shore. But sadly, this card requires a group of at least 15 people to force some pirates, led by a game master named Razor, out of a town called Sofrabi, something this group isn't strong enough for. So Gon, Killua, and Bisky search for some people that are up to the task. Someone like Corolo, perhaps? When Killua returned to Greed Island, he used a spell card to show him a list of people he's encountered thus far, but neither Gon or Killua could have suspected the leader of the Phantom Troop to be amongst them. After all, he shouldn't even be able to play the game. Kurapika took away his Nen, so Corolo doesn't even have the ability to enter Greed Island. But that doesn't matter right now. All that matters is he's strong and will make a good teammate. However, the evil teammate they're about to pick up is not quite who you'd think. Turns out everybody's favourite creepy clown Hisoka has adopted his crush's name and become even stranger than ever before. Like seriously, I don't know why they thought this clip I'm about to show was acceptable, but here it is.
There are so many things wrong with that, I don't even know where to begin.
I have no clue why this happened, but it does, and I'd rather forget about it. So let's talk about a very intense game of dodgeball. Gon, Killua, and Bisky team up with Tazgera, his group, and a guy named Gorenu, who actually joined earlier, but I didn't mention him because he's probably the most boring character in all of Hunter x Hunter. Anyways, with the team now assembled, Gon and friends make their way back to Sofrabi, but things play out a little differently. One of the pirates tries forming an uprising against Razor so they can all leave Greed Island, but this very messed up pirate is quickly put in his place. After the pirate is dealt with, Razor finally faces off against everyone in one huge game of dodgeball, or should I call it war. Razor doesn't pull his punches while playing, so anyone unlucky enough to be hit by his spikes could easily find themselves headless, only continuing to prove just how terrible Jing is. The reason Razor is taking the game so seriously is because Jing told him,
"And not to take it easy on you."
I alluded to this moment earlier, but this goes beyond putting his child in dangerous situations. He's literally told an ex-convict responsible for murder to basically rough up Gon. So in my very humble opinion, I believe Jing is one of the worst fathers in any anime or manga out there, only beaten by the likes of Gambino from Berserk, but hey. This game isn't all child abuse and people having near-death experiences. After all, we've got a funny little clown playing. Seeing Hisoka fighting alongside Gon and Killua certainly is a trippy sight, but it's kinda fun. Although I did really want to see Kurolo team up with them. I know it wasn't possible, but there's definitely an alternate universe out there where Kurolo and Gon fight together, and one day I'm gonna see it. But that day isn't today, so instead I'd like to focus on Killua, who goes above and beyond for his dear friend. Killua's hands become seriously injured while helping Gon aim the ball. His hands end up turning purple, and if that doesn't make him a good friend, then I don't know what does. With the combined strength of Gon, Killua, and Hisoka, Razor is eventually defeated, meaning Gon has obtained Patch of Shore, which finally puts him on Genfuru's radar. But Bisky still needs to train Gon and Killua a little bit more whilst they recover, and while they're off training, Tascara keeps Genfuru busy, until learning that Mr. Batera has cancelled the reward. Turns out Batera was only purchasing copies of Greed Island in hopes of getting his hands on a card named Archangel's Breath, an S-tier spell card that heals any injuries, but sadly, he wasn't able to get it in time. Batera wanted the card because it could be used to heal his lover, but she dies near the end of this arc. It's a heartbreaking scene. We haven't even heard of this woman, yet her death hits so hard, and I think it's due to how realistic it felt. We never get to see her lying in bed, and we never see the accident that led to her death. All we're able to see is someone torn apart by the memory of her. And this whole event becomes even more tragic when you look back on Greed Island. Even if Tascara managed to beat the game, it wouldn't have mattered. You're only able to take 3 slot cards with you after beating the game, so they wouldn't have been able to get Archangel's Breath to begin with. But speaking of beating the game, it's time for the final battle. Gon, Killua, and Bisky versus Genfuru and his irrelevant sidekicks. The fight starts with Gon and friends using spell cards to flee from Genfuru's gang, but after running out, Bisky and Killua run in opposite directions and use spell cards to teleport themselves to a different location, only to be followed by sidekick 1 and 2, which leaves Gon to face Genfuru all on his own, and of course, Gon takes one hell of a beating. But we're gonna step away from that for a moment and talk about Bisky vs Sidekick 1 and Killua vs Sidekick 2. Firstly, we have Bisky, who absolutely pummels Sidekick 1. She literally uses a fighting game combo on this guy, but with a swift backhand to the face, Bisky is sent flying, which leads to one of my favourite moments in Greed Island. Her fist planted firmly in the sand, her muscles start to expand before hitting Sidekick 1 with an extremely powerful punch directly to the nose, which completely flattens his face, and then we're given the big reveal.
I'm too buff and I hate it!
It's a nice explanation as to why Bisky looks the way she does, but watching this for the first time you'll probably not even pick up on that, as you'll either be too shocked to think properly, or you'll be laughing hysterically. Secondly, we have Killua, and I'd love to say this fight is on the same level as Bisky's, but it isn't. During this fight, Killua reveals his new weapon, a pair of yo-yos. but these just seem like they were added to spice up this one fight, because outside of these yo-yos, there's really nothing going on here. Also, where did they come from? I don't want to be that guy, because it kind of feels like I'm nitpicking when I make comments like this, but I think it's a valid question. We're told these yo-yos are made out of a special alloy created by Killua's brother, but the only brother of his that's appeared during this arc is Kaluto. So did Killua just take a detour to Kukuru Mountain when he left for the Hunter exam? I highly doubt it, so are we just left to assume that he's had these for the entirety of Hunter x Hunter? If so, why hasn't he used them before? And why are they used so little going forward? It's a really creative weapon, yet the series very rarely takes advantage of it. And when Killua does eventually use his yo-yos, it's always extremely underwhelming. Anyways, I realize I've been rambling on about these yo-yos for a lot longer than I should have, so I'm finally gonna talk about Gon versus Genfuru. For the very first time, Gon has to put everything on the line. This fight could easily result in his death, and he's fighting just as recklessly as always. Gon and Genfuru are on a similar level, but after some time, Genfuru starts using one of his Nen abilities, Little Flower. Aside from being a very good piece of foreshadowing for the next arc, it's also a very deadly weapon that Genfuru attempts to remove Gon's arms with. Genfuru charges at Gon, grabbing both of his arms, only to get kicked in the chin by Gon, but Genfuru's attack still landed. Gon gave up both of his arms in order to hit Genfuru, and it's certainly an ugly sight. Both of his arms are charred and he is covered in bruises, but Gon won't give up. Even though one of his hands is literally missing, it will take way more than that for Genfuru to actually make Gon drop. So the fight continues. And I really enjoyed how Togashi finished this fight. Gon could have kept fighting, but the only way he'd win is by getting a random power-up. So instead, Gon uses the mechanics of Greed Island to outsmart Genfuru. Firstly, Gon soaks him in gasoline using a card, which stops Genfuru from taking advantage of Little Flower, and after leading Genfuru into a trap, he uses another card. The card used by Gon creates a massive boulder that forces Genfuru to follow Gon into the darkness, and with the boulder right behind him, Genfuru no longer has any escape, which allows Gon to use his special ability.
I surrender! I surrender!
And with that, Genfuru is finished, meaning no one can stand in the way of Gon, Killua, and Bisky beating the game. After healing up and stealing some of Genfuru's cards, Gon and friends take a short quiz before they're given the final card they need to complete Greed Island. We're given a fun celebration and get to meet a few more of Jing's friends, but the most exciting thing to see is Gon, Killua, and Bisky choosing the cards they'd like to keep. Gon intends on getting a spell card to find Jing, as according to his binder, the first person he'd met on Greed Island was someone named Ning, but they're only allowed to take slot cards with them, so it takes a little bit of trickery to get the card Gon wants, but eventually they're able to get it. So after leaving Greed Island, Gon and Killua say a quick farewell to Bisky before leaving.
Nig!
Gon and Killua reach their destination, but is the man just ahead of them really Jing, or could it be someone else? Well, you're gonna have to wait a bit to find out, cause we've reached the end of Greed Island. But after my next video, I'll be uploading my 2-part review of the Chimera Ant arc back to back, as it might just be one of my favourite arcs of all time. But if you've enjoyed this video, then please make sure to smash that like button, leave a comment down below, and hit that big red subscribe button with the bell on, because I'm trying to reach 1,000 subs by the end of the year, and any help in that goal would be much appreciated. But until then, goodbye to you lovely, lovely people.